All right. Good morning, everybody. Figuring out a whole lot of new buttons here. This is my most fun. This is the most fun I'll ever have in a studio. It's like figuring out what's going on where and trying to like make sense of all of this stuff. I love it. Well, with me is Phumelele Mashego.
Believe it or not.
Yeah, believe it or not. And we're obviously testing. We're testing all the stuffs at the same time, right, Pums?
Everything all the time.
And we're trying to figure out where the lights are, and we even had the lights trip on us this morning. There's always something that gets thrown in the way. It just makes it a little more fun than it should be, you know?
It's like when you build a house, it's the snag list.
Yeah, and I mean now I'm trying to figure out like why we can't light you properly. But you see, these are the teething problems that we've got to get used to, I suppose. These are the things
we're gonna have to find some like front lights.
Yeah.
Like next week I'll bring a ring light.
No. We gotta put stuff here on the ceiling, and I mean we haven't even soundproofed this. Well, we've got the soundproof guys are busy with it.
Some soundproofing.
No, it's gonna happen, and it's all coming together.
So it's gonna have to be a theater of the mind on your YouTube.
What, for you?
Yeah.
Because we can't see your facial expressions, but. I think also it could have something to do with the background getting lighter and you sitting in a slightly darker room. Yeah, we'll figure it out.
It is getting lighter out there. It was a little gloomy coming in this morning. All that rain. It
looks nice though. I saw the Leonardo, which is the tallest building in Sandton, and it was. We
tried the lights off, me guys. We trust me. We've tried.
Oh, you mean they're busy giving us advice here? Oh God. All right. Well, listen, you morons. I've been doing this a lot longer than you. I don't need your outside interference. All right. And I drove in, saw the Leonardo, and the top of it, because it's such a tall building. I mean, it's way taller than the old Sandton City building.
It's one of the. It's definitely one of the new high-rise big.
Well, I think it's the tallest building in Africa.
In Africa.
I think it is. And it looked, the very top of it, maybe the top 5 or 6 floors was just in mist. You couldn't see it, which is very cool.
I did not. So I do want to say I've been checking out, because we're going down to KZN again this weekend. And I've been checking out the weather app.
Yes.
And it's like forecasting rain all over the damn country all the week till next week, Saturday.
Yeah. If you go to KZN, you're going to the worst of it, because there apparently it's going to be insanely cold. I mean, not cold, but rainy.
It's cold in the Midlands, hey? It gets cold in the Midlands because you're in the mountains, you're in the valleys. It always gets very, very cold, but it's going to be very exciting. We're turning on taps at our water project.
Excellent. That's very good news.
Very exciting. We've got people coming from...
That's amazing.
A lot of places.
All right, so just for people who don't know, just tell them about this water project, because this is worth discussing.
This is a fun thing. So, where my dad is from, the village where my dad is from, they still get water from a well that was dug up by the community. 2022, when we started with the project last year, this is where they were getting the water from. Even though there's some boreholes in the community, they were running dry, they were badly built, all of that. Hana.
Right.
And a friend of ours wanted to put a project in honor of his parents who passed away. And so they were looking for a philanthropic project to do. It's quite a wealthy family, and they've got businesses around the country, and they wanted to do something and they didn't know what.
Right.
And so we put them in touch with an Israeli company that does solar-powered boreholes and water technology. Obviously, they're in the desert. We know this about Israel. This is what they do.
That's what they know.
They've turned their desert into a garden, essentially.
Correct. They grow the tomatoes I put in my salad.
I
love me the Israeli tomatoes. Yes. And I don't give a shit if the what are they called? The sadomasochism, bondage, sadomasochism, and BDSM. What are they called?
No, they're not BDS. They're called BDS.
It's them. You know what I mean.
Yeah, we're probably pissing off the mayor of Joburg right now.
Oh, fuck him. Listen, let's start off with
Look at this enterprising Ryan.
I know.
Well done, Ryan.
There we go. We're managing to get some light for Phumi now. Ryan,
nice warm glow.
There, you look lovely, Phumi. Oh, God. Things are being knocked around here. It's crazy. All right, so listen. Few things. People are already saying that you have witchcraft on your side because you nailed the resignation of Didi Mabuza. But Pums, this was not a.
And so, are you all waiting for Paul Mashatile to become president?
Well, that's what I said to everybody when I heard about this. But I mean, we're obviously, first of all, I laughed because we were on with Candace Mama on Monday and Leanne, and she and Leanne and I were all saying, "Oh, what are we going to do without Didi Mabuza? He's such a valuable guy in the community."
Yes, he runs.
He's so valuable.
Business.
How are we going to manage without that?
He
stalwart?
runs the business of government. That's the role of the deputy president. Y'all don't know this, but it's true. That's the reason y'all don't know this is because in those 9 wasted years, we had Cyril as deputy president.
And they were wasted because of that. Maybe. Maybe that was part of the reason it was wasted. Oh my God.
No, we're reading the tea leaves out here. Y'all, if this is not a sign that you should be listening to the Burning Platform, I don't know what is. We see these things coming.
Well, you saw it coming. And I'm very impressed, and we've got to give you credit.
I am still counting down. I'm waiting to see if Lindiwe Sisulu is actually going to tender her resignation. I, for one, thought it was going to happen before Christmas because she did say, you remember there was that huge kind of interview that she did, and she was like, shoot, if Comrade Cyril won another term, I would find it very difficult to serve under him.
But
I thought she was going to resign.
And she hasn't been to Parliament for so long that they actually... They called her out yesterday or something. I briefly overheard something to that effect. They're going to discipline her for not pitching for Parliament for like a year.
For not pitching at the tourism portfolio committee. There was a meeting. She did show up for 20 minutes 2 days ago. So 2 days ago, there was after the big Tottenham Hotspur.
Yeah. Disaster.
And that horrendous press conference by the acting CEO, Themba Khumalo, they were called down to explain themselves. The SA Tourism were called to explain themselves to the portfolio committee.
Mm-hmm.
And the session was supposed to start at 9:00. Yeah. Lindiwe was nowhere to be seen.
Right.
She arrived at about 12:05. Too much. She did say, she sent out a statement yesterday, guys, for all those people that were awful to her on social media and everything else, because the chairperson of that committee is Thandi Mahambehlala. And she was spitting fire. She was so upset. So Lindiwe came in at 12. She said, there was another in-contact meeting, cabinet meeting that she had to be at. Blah, 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 blah.
Is that true?
Who knows?
Is there a way we can check? Because if she's also
there must be a way
a liar.
But what she did say, and then she stayed for 20 minutes, and then she left after all the rushing in with.
Would she have a hair appointment? What?
And then then Thandi asked, and then Minister, the secretary did say that she left a message that if they needed her, she'd be at her office. And Thandi was like, Magalandwe. Call her back immediately. So there's a bit of a power struggle between the two of them. Thandi Mahambehlala was one of the people who had actually supported Lindiwe Sisulu's kind of bid for the ANC presidency. But she quickly jumped ship, and she was spitting fire in that portfolio committee meeting. She was very mad. She was mad at the CEO and the way that he had addressed not just, at the media, at the press conference, but essentially the entire country. He was awful. He was like dressing us all down like we don't know. And he'd have moments where he'd say, I'm going to speak directly to camera now. Just, you should know this. And I was like, this guy, he was awful. So they made him apologize. I don't know if he's going to call another press conference to apologize.
But don't these people, because we hear all the time they have media training and they've got people to help them not be a disaster. And he was a disaster.
So Themba Khumalo is actually a very seasoned communicator. He's been in marketing and communications longer than I have.
Well, that's what was one of the that's what the CV says. Clients. But put a camera in front of him and look what happened.
This guy, hubris. That's my word for him. I think he's at that place. I mean, this guy came from the Unilever School of Marketing. You know, they train them well out there at Unilever. He was he launched Cell C all those many years ago. He's worked at MTN. He is a well-seasoned marketer. He knows better.
Okay.
And all I can say is that level of arrogance is hubris.
Yeah. Do you think that just comes from believing in himself more than he should be believed in?
I don't think the belief in him was misplaced. But I do think that...
No, I'm saying he believes in himself more than he should.
I don't think it's misplaced.
So then
he has got a track record. And so we know that he knows better. People in the fraternity know that he knows better. And this is why it was horrifying to watch. It was cringe. Was that the right word? It really was.
And that can happen.
And the only word I can think of is that the level of arrogance that state-owned enterprises, people who run them, have now for some reason got, and the level of impunity with which they treat South African money and the public has it's gone.
Well, we have a whole morning to unpack these things, and there are a couple of things I just have to correct here. So somebody said that apparently the tallest building is in Egypt. It's called Iconic. That might be the tallest, and then the Leonardo is the second tallest here in Sandton.
Wow.
Okay, and then Sanele says we got 10 likes, so then the first 10 minutes we got to get 120 and 120 minutes. So let's go, everybody. Let's do that. Let's make it happen, please. Congo Chris says, are you looking forward to a whole SONA full of lies from RamaPromises? I love that.
So can I tell you the word SONA in Zulu means we are sinning. So,
can this get any worse?
Because the noun is isono, right? A friend of mine has been saying all week, so no nanini, as in when will you be sinning?
Well, it's all going to come. Listen, I'm not going to bother watching, are you? Because
I certainly will.
You will. You see, you still...
Of course I will.
You're a good citizen.
No.
I just don't even remember what he said last year that anything has been actioned on. Everything's got worse.
What do you mean? They released a scorecard. The presidency released their own scorecard.
And what did they say?
They scored themselves.
How did they score themselves?
Better than half. So they definitely did not score green all around. So there were some ticks. I think there are on their scorecard about 18 things that the president promised at last year's SONA. And
like what? What did he promise?
Let's find the scorecard.
Didn't he say he was going to build a new future technological city out in Lanseria?
Was that last year? Or the
it was
year
last
before?
year. I don't know. That was the biggest thing. When he promised that, I was like, yeah, that sounds exciting.
The year before.
Well, I mean, we're still waiting for that, right?
Let's find the scorecard. I'm going to find the scorecard.
I want to know what's on that fucking scorecard. Sounds awesome. All right. Well, Phumi, people are saying you should become an exorcist because you figured out Didi Mabuza.
Guys, if I could be an exorcist, I think there's some serious demons we need to exorcise in our parliament. Serious demons. If I could do that, y'all.
Gift says, wait, you didn't finish your water project story. You left us
I did.
hanging.
We've got so the water project is, we built 2 tanks and about, 500,000 liter capacity, I think. And 10 taps and kind of water piping around the community with 10 taps that links to these.
But could you do the same for your relatives who have blue water?
The blue water is not yet sorted, but being sorted. Ooh,
yeah.
Shame. My poor brother. I don't know. You see, maybe there's a water spirit like tormenting our family. But look, so the water project this weekend, we essentially opened the taps, and we've got the families coming down. They're coming up from Cape Town and down from Joburg because they in those 2 cities. We've got some of the people from the organization coming from Israel to come and share the joy with the community. We're having a big community party, like the school kids. So what this means is it means that the young people, school kids, who essentially spend about 2 hours a day fetching water to bath, cook, wash their clothes, all of that kind of stuff, they don't have to spend that much time. And hopefully they spend that time on their schoolwork.
Yeah, I mean, when you don't have water, everything else comes second. So that makes perfect sense.
About 3,000 people are now going to have access to clean running water for forever, because the water's there. The water's there.
That's really spectacular. I think that, you often talk about people. We've got to get up and do our stuff ourselves. We've got to make it happen. And here you are proving it. You're doing it. You're doing it yourself. You're doing it for other people. You're not even doing it for your own community. You're doing it for a community out in KZN.
So essentially, probably about 15 people in total, 15 South Africans in total, excluding the people who work for Innovation Africa, is the company that we partnered with, have changed the lives of 3,000 people.
Amazing. Overnight.
Well,
I mean, for them.
But this is the point, right? So just 15 people.
Once you turn on those taps, then suddenly everything changes.
So if there were 500,000 of us all doing stuff, we can change this country.
Yeah, we've all got to really roll our sleeves up. I suppose that's the whole thing. So a lot of people here are saying, Phumi, please give us some more premonitions while you're on a roll. And I love this from Viasan. He said, why don't they just replay last year's SONA or the other year or the other year? Because they're all the same.
What's the point of it?
That's why I say I'm not watching.
I've been watching.
I'm not watching.
I did say to Dory that I wanted us to chat about this in the Burning Platform, and we've got a lot coming in the Burning Platform.
We don't want to use up all our energy now.
But I really, this week, obviously in America, they also had the State of the Union.
Yes.
Joe Biden.
Yes.
John Steenhuisen has his SONA, is what they call it, true State of the Nation. He presented that on Tuesday, I think.
Yeah.
On Monday, Herman Mashaba, I think it's a soft launch for their campaign for 2024, but it was also the same kind of thing, right? And so I watched all of them because I'm quite fascinated to see what are the differences, what are the similarities, but also quite importantly for me is understanding what all of these guys are saying. So what's John saying? What's Herman saying? I was interested to see what the State of the Union for Joe Biden looks like, and how he's responding to the past year. And it was interesting.
We should save that for later. We've also got Kanthan popping in, which is going to be fun. So Kanthan Pillay will be joining us for the Burning Platform. Plus, we've got Joel Pollak from Los Angeles, who'll be in the studio with us as well. He's here to launch his mother-in-law's book, the biography about his mother-in-law.
His mother-in-law,
Rhoda Kadali.
Wow.
And he's also here because he's a sometime listener of the show, and he's been in regular contact with us. I've done some interviews with him, and I know that Kanthan is itching to talk about American politics, so we thought we'd bring in someone who knows what they're talking about, and you and I can jump in there when we want to as well. So a couple of things. There's a poll on YouTube right now asking if you are going to watch the SONA tonight. The options are yes, no, or I don't care enough. So go and take a look.
If we have power.
Oh, that's also true. Yeah. Correct.
Are they going to suspend the load shedding for that? Bless you.
If they can suspend the load shedding for that nonsense, then they can suspend load shedding in perpetuity. Really? Like it's a question of priorities. Anyway, so that's all on the agenda. Then I see you wanted to talk about, but you might not know that we've spoken about this already. And I don't want to turn it into a beat-up session because I said the other day it's starting to sound like we're a bit ageist, but you wanted to talk about Madonna's new face.
I do. I know you guys spoke about it yesterday.
You go. I don't want to climb in again on Madonna. People are going to start thinking I've got an obsession, and I really don't.
The reason I wanted to talk about it is obviously yesterday the internet went nuts over the past
Yeah.
2 days. And yesterday, what was really funny for me is comparing Madonna at 64 with Nancy Reagan at 63.
Yeah. Right.
But even if they compared them when they were 25, both
Right.
25, I would still choose Madonna.
Really.
Yeah, I would still choose Madonna.
But Nancy was she looked like a very dignified older lady.
Even at 25.
Yeah, but
Listen.
you get people who you know that's how a 60-something-year-old woman who's not trying to. I mean, you would rather go with Madonna?
I'd rather go with Madonna. But listen, the thing about it for me is, have you
Sweet
seen?
Jesus. I think it's just because you don't like Nancy Reagan's politics.
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
Ageist.
Just
I'm
saying.
an older lady.
Okay.
I'm an older black lady, and I still choose Madonna.
All right.
But you know what it reminded me of? Watching that, like her face transformation, but also with everything else that's going on, whether it's face tattoos. I also saw on the internet some guy who's like turned himself into a gender neutral dragon.
Yeah, he's blue.
Yeah, his scales and
we showed his picture last week. Frightening looking creature.
You know what it's reminding me of almost daily, the
What?
experience we are having here in 2023. The Capitol on Hunger Games. I think we're like, this is the world we're becoming. It's
Well.
like, do you remember what that scene was like when they arrived at the Capitol?
Yeah.
And also even in the second film, in Mockingjay, I think it was, or
Yeah.
Catching Fire, when they back in the Capitol and all the secrets and the people, we're living in that future world. We are now living in that world.
I have to stretch my mind back a little while. I didn't really get into the Hunger Games, but I remember watching it. So
of course,
I'll
because
rewatch
it's all
it now.
this like dystopian future.
I'll watch it now and I'll see if I can pick up on what you're dropping.
Jeez, like with the face tattoos. And do you remember that the most extreme thing that we knew about face tattoos was Mike Tyson?
Yes.
And now
it's de rigueur. It's everybody's doing it, right?
And this is what the dragon guy, Madonna's face, everything that's kind of going
Frightening.
on just reminded me of living in the Hunger Games, which in itself.
Okay,
right?
so I'll watch it again, and this time I'll watch it with an eye to understanding how we're devolving into that dystopian world. I hope you're not right. I mean,
I hope I'm not right too.
I was saying the other day, and again, I don't want to beat a drum that we've been beating now for 2 weeks, but everything around us is becoming so much uglier. Art is uglier. Modern art is revolting, and it's not just a taste thing, but it seems devoid of any objective beauty. It seems that modern art, and we've spoken very briefly about that Martin Luther King sculpture they unveiled in Boston, which is just disgusting. It looks like a big copper-colored turd. And I know it's meant to be him and Coretta embracing, but it's these disembodied arms, and it looks terrible. There are very few examples of modern art that you can actually say objectively would hold up to anything from the Renaissance, from classical antiquity. It seems that we have lost the ability to make beautiful things. I think people are on purpose. Either we've lost that ability or we're not paying any attention to the true artists. Instead, we're giving a whole lot of attention to
Shock
Sam
value.
Smith, Madonna, people who can put a toilet exhibit in and call it
Shock
Trump.
value.
It's become like performative instead of artistic.
Because I think the world is still full of beautiful things and happy people.
No, the world is beautiful and there are beautiful people, but Jesus, the stuff that everyone's making a fuss over is all the ugly stuff.
It's and what that says about, but it is also like mass anxiety in the entire world.
Well,
It's
why?
just-
Because we got less war than we've ever had. There are more resources than they've ever been. The average person lives in a better state than any of their ancestors, even if your ancestors were extremely lucky and privileged. Everything is better. There are less dangers to the average person now than there have ever been. So what is all this anxiety? Is it just boredom? Is it that we're becoming too soft?
Probably.
Is it that we're too soft?
Probably.
And if we're too soft, the only way to really deal with this anxiety is to make people's lives harder. So
No.
the next person who comes to me and says, "Oh, I've got too much anxiety," I'm going to say, "Your life's too soft. Go make your life harder."
I don't know if we need to make life harder, but maybe we need to look more for more joy.
We look for beauty.
More joy, more
And-
beauty, instead of trying to contrast everything
And I think people
else.
are, which is why they don't watch the Grammys and why they're not interested in going to modern art
Yes.
galleries. I mean, modern art galleries have probably the lowest amount of pedestrian traffic that they've ever had.
Although there is a 3D immersive Dali experience in one of the galleries in London
Oh,
at
yeah?
the moment that I would like to see.
You'd like to go to that?
Yeah.
Well, Salvador Dali, at least he was a breakthrough creative thinker in his time, and you can't deny that
A
the guy
full immersive experience.
No,
it is
but
VR.
now, but anyone who's trying to do that now, I'm like, please, you're an also ran, you know. Anyway, you know what I hearken back to is this.
I
put
love
this
that.
up.
Harken back to. Jeez, Gareth.
Whenever I doubt myself as a mother, someone who is a mother sent this to me. I whip out this picture of a 6-year-old coal miner smoking a pipe in 1910, and there's this child smoking a pipe back in 1910, and I think, yeah, you know what? As I said in
6-year-old coal miner.
a 6-year-old coal miner, don't tell me that life is hard and you've got anxiety. That kid at 6 years old, if that coal miner at the age of 6 had said, Mommy, I've got anxiety. First of all, Mommy probably wasn't around. The foreman would have said, the shop steward would have said, get in the mine, you little shit. Look at it. And it's smoking a pipe to relieve its anxiety.
Shame.
But
What
you know
is
what?
that on its head?
As I said, Phumi, at the time on Instagram, I said, the children used to be in the mines. They love playing Minecraft now. The children yearn for the mines. Just put them back in the mines.
Jeez. I don't know if the children yearn for
I think
that.
they yearn for the mines. That's why they're such little shits. My sister posted a picture in our family group last night. Her next door neighbors have got 2 children who can't behave. And they actually
can't behave.
They can't behave. They put their footprints on the wall. They were trying to climb the garden gate, my sister's garden gate, and they've damaged the door. Like they've obviously been, throwing sharp things at it or whatever, but they've done damage to this door. And she's like, "What do I do?" So
I am having cognitive dissonance at the can't behave.
I know that. They can't behave.
I am a black mom. I cannot understand that.
Let me tell you,
I don't
these
understand
These two children.
That is a failure of parenting.
Yes, it is. But how do you address this? So my sister-in-law, who is a mother, said, "Go and speak to the parents."
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's obviously smart advice. I said nuke their house, but then
which
I'm a
could
bit
also
reactive.
it could also be smart advice.
And then you end up with a much bigger yard. Might be a bit radioactive for a few hundred years, but you got a much bigger yard.
So speak to the parents is like, it reminds me of a video that was on social media doing the rounds a couple of years ago, with it like black mom kind of, she was about to do a TikTok or something.
But you say this like black mom is a general term.
It is.
It is not. I know some terrible black moms who do no disciplining. I do. And I know some white moms who are like the black moms that you're thinking of. I do. I know some of the, I used to get claps. Phumi.
Yeah.
That's like, as far as I can tell, my mother's very low on melanin, but she can clap. I got my last clap from her in my 20s, I think. She was like, boom.
Yeah.
Talk to me like that.
If you deserve it, Gareth. Yeah. It's just,
but,
and look at you today. You've
these kids,
grown up. So the little girl, but this story is really funny. So she's about to do a little TikTok and a little daughter comes in and says, "Mom, before they tell you anything, I'm just going to quickly tell you because they're going to say a lot of things and it's going to, so so-and-so, right? And you know how you say like men are providers and the mom's like, yeah. Yes, they go out and they work and whatever. And says, well, so-and-so's mom works and the dad stays at home and looks after all the kids. And and then we got into this argument and then I was like, yeah, but that's why your dad's a bitch. And the mom's like,
ooh,
what?
But she's right.
And she's like, yeah, but The mom goes and works, and the dad is like, and the mom's still trying to figure out and says, yeah, they want to talk to you downstairs. I was just like,
Oh, shit.
oh God.
Oh, wow. So the little girl.
But you have to talk to the parents.
Okay, so
But it's
first of all,
also-
I do think a stay-at-home dad is a bitch.
I man.
Absolutely. And I
What
will,
if the why?
there's just, I'm sorry. You call me a traditionalist, call me an old school misogynist, call me
Why?
whatever you like. There is something completely emasculated and sad and pathetic about a stay-at-home dad. There is also, there's evidence. You can go and look up the statistics that stay-at-home fathers are about 50% more likely to get divorced than fathers who work.
Why?
Because they don't feel any purpose. The man's point in life is to
No.
provide.
Oh, no.
The whole reason a man exists is to provide for the people he loves.
Rubbish.
Promise you.
No.
They won't admit it, but that's what men are there for. They're there to provide. If we are not providing for the women and the children that we love, we don't have a purpose.
But then
And
providing
have you
what?
met stay-at-home dads?
I don't actually.
Yeah, exactly. Because they're terrible people. They're weak,
no.
sad, pathetic people. You wouldn't want to be friends with them.
No, what I disagree with is the blanket statement that
well,
they're
you said-
all pathetic.
Okay, but you said black moms.
Yeah, black
now,
mom
I'm saying,
and
I'm saying
black mom is an archetype.
and the stay-at-home dad is an archetype. So by your own
Why
definition,
would you hate? But why
I don't
would
hate
you
them.
hate a person?
I don't hate them. I said they're pathetic. I don't hate them. I don't have any feelings about them. And I'm sure that there are some stay-at-home
That's
dads.
very judgmental.
There are some stay-at-home dads who will break the rule, just like they're going to be black moms who are not the kind of black mom you're thinking of. And these stay-at-home dads, by and large, the archetype, the stereotype is of a pathetic man who, what's he
Why
doing?
does it have
So
to
what's
be
he doing?
pathetic?
Okay, because being,
Doing the washing.
no. So being a
kids,
mom
fetching, all of
doesn't
that.
include all of that stuff. But the mom is the primary caregiver in any child's life.
Yes.
Don't have an argument on that front,
No,
right?
no argument.
You have largely spent the most time around your son, regardless of how much time the father's been around or not.
No, true.
You've been the primary caregiver,
True.
and that is true for every child who has a mother
True.
and a father,
True.
right? The mom is there to be your main interlocutor with the world as a child. And that is a full-time job for a mom. And therefore, the mom's presence is more readily required. Now, I'm not saying, and I'm not making rules for anybody here. You can go and do what you want. You could be one of those super women, and they are super women who, like you, do a full-time job, have a child, look after the house, all of those things. And you might do an immaculate job at all of them. You might do an 80% job at all of them. You might do one at 80, one at 20, whatever.
Yeah, it's never,
you know?
it's, yeah.
It's
all sorts of variations.
Believe me,
of all
I
of
am
those.
not laying down the
Yeah.
law. I'm not saying that this isn't the way it should be. But for a man, so if he's staying at home, he's doing the washing, cooking, cleaning. What else is he doing?
Fetching the kids, dropping off.
Honestly, if that's what he's doing,
But what if
that is not, he's not performing a necessary role in society. He is not, he feels deep down inside, and I'd love to meet a house husband, whatever you meant to call them, who can look me in the eye and say to me, honestly, that is enough for him.
But okay, I don't know a lot of stay-at-home dads. I actually don't think I know any I don't know a lot of stay-at-home people, stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home dads. I think we don't have that kind of luxury. For a lot of us, we don't have that kind of luxury. But I do think that for a person who's self-actualized enough to know that they don't want to do
It's not that.
something.
It's never that.
What is it?
I can promise you now that the guy who stays as stay-at-home dad is not a self-actualized evolution of the masculine type. You know, he's not some kind of rule-breaking pioneer. He's opting out. He's opting out due to weakness and because he thinks that that's going to replace his laziness with some purpose.
Lazy.
It is laziness. I'm telling you now that there is no man who can find purpose and meaning in being a stay-at-home dad. There's just no way. And that is because I've just defined how different men and women are and how different their roles are. It's a completely different universe. There are women who can do all three of those things that I mentioned. A man can it's impossible for a man to do that one that I mentioned and feel fulfilled. It's just not. You can argue. I mean, Wen says
hey, Deepa Sejan to saying.
Wen
People
says
in the comments need
you're sounding very biblical, Gareth. That's great, especially when you're addressing an atheist. Great argument there, Wens. Zoe, is Gareth correct? Why is Zoe a stay-at-home dad?
Who's Zoe?
I don't know. Harry is a stay-at-home. Exactly. Prove my point.
Who's Harry?
He can't find work, perhaps. There's a 40% unemployment rate. Sure, that is a big problem. But a stay-at-home dad?
But we're talking about choice. We're talking about people who choose to be.
That's what I'm saying. It's not. I'm saying it's not. It's just it's the default. They're defaulting to lazy, and they think. And maybe there's an imbalance of power in the relationship as well, to the extent that the woman she's self-actualized and she's out there doing a job as well as being a mom. And maybe she's really good at her job and she's shit at being a mom, or maybe she's great at both. I don't know. But the fact that the guy is happy to accept that as his lot, and he considers that the kind of thing, there is no man who's proud to admit that to a group of his male friends. No man on earth. It would be the greatest humiliation for any man, no matter how in touch with his feelings he is, no matter how new age he is, no matter how hands-on as a dad he is in terms of packing the children's lunch and all the stuff that we love to hear about in society. This is something that there's no guy who walks up to a bunch of other guys at the braai, even if his kids are perfectly well adjusted and he's proud of himself and he's proud of his life and he's proud of his wife, walks up to the others and goes, and they say, what do you do? I know, well, I've got a little business. We sell tablecloths. What do you do? Oh, I clean people's pools. What do you do? I'm an electrician. What do you do, John? No, I'm a stay-at-home dad. Instant chill in the conversation. Everything goes dead quiet, and then they'll say something. This is what we do in society now. We lie to each other because people have confused politeness for lying, and you see this with it's kind of filtered down from politicians. So what people do now is they lie. So someone in the group will say, "Oh, that's great. Why don't you tell me how that goes and tell me how that works?" And meanwhile, they don't give a shit. They get the hell away from me, you weak, little foppish, sad, pathetic man. I don't want to sit and talk to you because you don't have anything to say. You didn't choose this.
But
it chose you.
On the issue of provider, right? What is being provided? Is that not of substance too? If what he's providing in the environment, and I mean, I think about
short answer is no.
I know exactly what you're going to say. What am I going to say? A home, a hearth. No. Right? A different form of stability, which is what children need. And you say, is it a power imbalance? So if you have a wife who has a high-powered job for whatever reason in Ranoi, right? And kids, and you have children, and she would have had to bear the children because of the physiological. Sure. And what you need is a level of stability, particularly when kids are much younger, for the kids. And so what he is providing in that experience is he's providing that holistic experience for the kids. He's providing stability. I'll
tell you. So, Pums, you are completely denying thousands and thousands of years of biological evolution. There was never a time in our most ancient past, before all of the technology and social constructions and anything else, there was never a time where if a man didn't feel like going out to hunt with the other men, one of the women would go instead, and he'd stay at home in the cave and look after the children. There was never a time, and if that man was in a tribe, the tribe would kill him. It's you could say, Gareth, that's very mean, and you can call me all kinds of names. There are people in the comments who are saying you are you backwards or what. Go for it. That is just how it is. Now you cannot deny the truth. Again, we've become so comfortable with lying to each other that someone somewhere is actually sitting there believing this propaganda that we've been sold. And this is only in the last 50 years, because 50 years before that, if we'd even had this conversation and you'd even raised your side of the argument, you would have been chased out of the room with brooms. You would have been called a witch. You would have been ostracized from society. I mean, there's no way. A house husband, do me a favor.
I think we need a step with husbands.
If any of my friends ever became a house husband, I don't know that I'd be able to respect them.
Oh.
And I mean that in the kindest way possible. I'm talking about my friends, the people I already like. And, you know, you can say that's gender roles and social.
No, it's not. I'm simply asking if there isn't a need that has changed in our society.
No, not that much in 50 years. And if you think it has,
not that much in 50 years.
No. I
think a lot has changed in 50 years.
Now I'm going to say something misogynistic. This is all because you women got the vote. You're starting to think you could change everything.
No, it's because we burnt the bras. It's actually because we burnt the bras and then we never kept them burnt.
But here's the sad part of that. And I know that there are a lot of men who are suffering with this right now in South Africa, and it's worth reflecting on because it is a major cause of so much of the domestic violence and the domestic shit that we deal with in South Africa and in the world. Is that because men are the providers, when they can't provide, the frustration and the internal trauma and the lack of ability to do anything meaningful in the world in terms of providing piles into them and onto them so much guilt, so much shame, so much self-abuse that they put that out into the world.
Gareth, is it though? Is it not?
Because they're only judged on one thing. Men are judged entirely on what they can bring home to the family.
But so we've now come full circle, right? Yeah. Because it is also the fact that we all, so you say even my friends whom I already like, if they had to be that person, I would stop respecting them.
Understand.
And this is also
I would have
one of the facets that creates this mental block for men.
No, this is not a cause. This is an effect. No, you mustn't. No, don't get them mixed up. This is not a symptom or a disease.
No.
This is an effect, not a cause.
But I'm saying to you that it is one of the facets that makes it that compounds.
It's not even
thing.
Even in the top 10 reasons why this starts to happen. It's not. And by the way, if one of my friends lost their job, totally different set of circumstances. You'll get empathy. You'll get consideration. You'll get one of us saying, hey, maybe you can come and work for me. Totally different thing. But the choice to be a house husband would render you diminished in most men's view.
Sure.
That's how it is. You see, again, women get together and they talk about things. I'm telling you what's going on, and I'm telling you how it works. I'm not saying I'm particularly a good example. I'm not saying my friends are a good example, or the way I was raised is necessarily the best example, but I will say this. This is what happens. And if guys are getting together and let's say there are 10 of them and 5 of them are unemployed, they can join in the conversation. But one says that they're a stay-at-home dad. Totally different treatment. And again, there may be exceptions to this rule. I am completely okay with hearing about those exceptions, but don't for a minute bullshit yourself that is suddenly the rule. Here's something interesting. Lebang says 70% of households are fatherless in South Africa due to men must provide. They focus only on providing and nothing else. Emotionally unavailable to their families. Balance is key. Okay, but now we're putting additional stuff onto them. I'm telling you that at the root, if a man is not providing, everything else falls apart. So actually, Lebang and I agree on this. It's highly unlikely that a man who is feeling like he can provide for his family is also an emotional disaster because he's feeling appreciated, usually. You know, if he gets home after a hard day's work and he has a family who love him, he's hardly likely to not love them back. But there's like his main purpose, the driving force for that guy is to provide, because that's his primary action in the world. It's like, I want to come home and I want to make sure that the people I love have everything they need and that I can bring them whatever they don't have. That's the main thing. That's what makes a man feel good. And this is amateur psychology on my part, I'm happy to admit. But so far, it's demonstrably true in almost every situation. Find me one that isn't, probably an exception, but bring it. I mean, I want to hear your thoughts on this, because there are a lot of people who will disagree with me. Congo Chris, though, says it's a biological imperative. It's not sociological, it's biological. Indy L says, I need to respect a man. I can't respect a man who can't provide for himself and stand on his own 2 feet. See, it's cruel to men,
Sure.
but it also is that's how we judge ourselves. So it's not that cruel. Tyron says, sounds like a stay-at-home dad turned out to be a cuck.
That's what
Horrible.
that's terrible. But that's what I'm hearing from you, is that it's how you judge yourself.
I would, if I couldn't, and I don't even have a family in terms of my own kids and wife. But if I did, this is the motivation. At the moment, I have to provide for myself. And as a fallback, I should be able to help family and friends where they need help, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the world, you need to be a provider. And right now we're providing hopefully either entertainment or information or argument, but it's providing that is your main job.
But and this is why my question around providing was important for me. What is being provided?
The first thing is you have to go out and bring home the bacon. After that, everything else falls into place. But if that isn't there, if you're not able to provide as a man, all the other stuff is like decoration on a cake that's made of shit.
Wow.
Really? Doesn't matter that you're packing lunch boxes or giving hugs. That's completely unimportant to the man's self-fulfillment. Got to be able to provide.
And that's the thing.
Again,
right?
this is just,
this is exactly what I'm saying.
I'm not saying this is not the absolute objective fact. This is my opinion of the facts,
But that's the thing, right? That's what I'm hearing for the first time. That it's for self. In order for self to be able to judge myself or look myself, you're saying that the need is more of an external provision of resource rather than just an emotional provision.
No, but it's amplified in a relationship and in a family. It's amplified. That's where again, this is where I have no experience. I can't speak of this as a father or as a husband, but it is obvious to me from all of the observation that I've done and a little bit of reading on this stuff and talking to people who really are expert in this. So again, it's secondhand information.
I wish we had somebody who's a stay-at-home dad. It's
clear to me that this is objectively provable. Just for your info, the poll on whether people are watching the SONA tonight, we've been running a poll on YouTube, sitting at 152 votes at the moment. 19% say yes, only 19%.
Wow.
55% have just said outright no, and 26% do not care enough.
Enina.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Hi, man.
That's it.
So how many votes? 154.
Yeah. So we'll keep going on that one.
We better have 154 likes on that YouTube too. Just like it's the same place.
Letlopanolo says, I don't know if Gareth knows what he's talking about. He has not had any family. I don't think he knows what it takes to have a family. You may have a point there. This stuff, again, is objective. And in fact, I might be more objective because I don't have a family.
What do you guys call it, you and Canthan? Lived experience.
Yeah, it's nonsense. There's no such thing to that. I don't buy it at all. Slippery Pickle says, instead of bacon, maybe the state can provide for stay-at-home dads with some ground-up insect protein.
Yuck.
Now in fourth wave feminism, we have doctorates in gender studies. You can't even say what a woman is. That's also a good point. Melissa says, so there could be 152 likes. Exactly.
Exactly, Melissa.
If people are voting, then why
it's on
can't
the same place.
Yeah, like the stream that we're on this morning.
Like and
Go
subscribe.
onto YouTube. There we go. Thank you.
My vote is my secret, says Bongi.
Dogozo says, that is why it's super important to sort your shit out as a man before making babies and starting a family. Now, that's also an interesting point.
Dogozo, that's a... Women that sort their shit out. I don't know if anybody gets to sort their shit out fully before.
Sibanda says, I'm a stay-at-home dad. My 2 wives work.
Sibanda, tell us more.
Henry says something interesting. He says, even as a gay man, I feel the need to provide. It's a strange dynamic when both men feel they need to provide. So we tend to provide, but roles are more like nurturer and protector.
Wow.
That's interesting. So you see, it doesn't have to do with your sexual preference. Comment section, Sanele calling out here, like, because Sanele is one of the marshals of the comment section. He's like, comment section, do we have a stay-at-home dad amongst us? Hands up. Sis Phumi wants to talk to you.
Wozangapha.
Yeah.
Really? Look.
Listen, this is going to be one of those things where people, and I'm just glad that we can have these conversations on this show, because try this on a university campus. It's just going to deteriorate into shouting matches and protests and people throwing things at each other. You cannot, and I'm really tired. I see it everywhere. We've spoken about, Madonna. We've spoken about art. We've spoken about families. It seems to me that there are people who are choosing to become outraged about stuff that's actually quite normal. And remember, South Africans are traditional and conservative, God-fearing people. They are, right?
Extremely.
Right. So when I say, for example, that a house husband is an irregular thing and someone gets outraged, you got to realize, like, you are in the tiniest of minorities if you are outraged by me talking about traditional gender roles. You are like the sprinkling of herbs on the top of a soup, because the average South African, black, white, old, young, rich, poor, is sitting there going, why would someone be outraged by what Gareth's saying?
When the mental imagery you're conjuring up this morning, top tier.
Oh, do you like it? The shit cake, the soup with sprinkling of herbs. Huh? Do you like
tier.
this?
Top tier. Yeah.
All right.
The notes. Hitting the notes.
Okay, well, Ricky says, I 100% agree. But in Australia, I see everywhere where only one parent works or where both parents work part-time until the children are like 12, then both of them become full-time employees again. Listen, people have different pressures, Phumi. This is the other thing. And this is where a little bit of understanding and taking individual lived experience into consideration is a part of this. You roll your eyes, but I know what you mean, right? I know when people say lived experience, what they mean is, pay attention to me, listen to me, I'm important too. They don't mean I've got something valuable to add. They mean, like, love me, pay attention to me. I didn't get enough of that from my parents. Anyway, we've got to accept that there are different strains on parents and on families and on relationships these days. Sometimes if the man earns less than the woman, there is an enormous problem in some of those relationships, which goes beyond them sitting down with a therapist and the guy coming to terms with himself and being comfortable with his wife being a powerhouse. I, for example, I can honestly say to you, I'm not intimidated by successful women. In fact, I love being around successful women. I find there are a few of these ladies, and again, it's a stereotype, but I've met a lot of women who are absolute powerhouses. And to me, it's exciting and sexy to be around them. I don't find myself comparing them and being insecure in their presence, any of that stuff. But if I were married to one of them, who knows how I would feel, right? You don't know until you're in that situation. What I will say is there are financial pressures in people these days. Both parents often have to work. So there isn't a traditional gender role for some of this.
But also in some places, I mean, I have a friend who lives in the UK, and one of the things that she speaks about a lot is the cost of childcare. Is how, unlike here, where you can get a nanny for a particular amount of money, and so you can both work. The cost of childcare is obviously a big factor for them.
Take that, first world.
It's one of the things that they really have to consider because one of them does have to stay. One of them does have to stay home, and sometimes it's a financial decision too, right? That says if you earn more than I do, and it
then
doesn't make sense.
Give.
Yeah, one of us is going to have to make this decision.
Well, Mortaling Away says, not being able to provide takes its toll on a man no matter how evolved he is. It's also true that provision in modern times can be that stability that Sis Phumi was talking about. So
yeah, and
I consider myself reprimanded.
It's there are lots of considerations at play. But I hear you. I hear what you're saying about a need. What did it call a deep down need to provide in a particular way. Yeah. I can tell you for free that I would have been miserable as a stay-at-home mom. It doesn't. It was even when Kaneho was very small and I had to stay with him. It was awful. It was awful for me, especially when he was a baby. I love my child a lot. I love him more today than I did when he was a little person, because now he can tell you stuff, right? He can tell you he's hungry. He can tell you.
Yeah.
But I would have struggled. I would have struggled with being a stay-at-home mom. I really would have.
I think a lot of women do.
Of it.
A lot of women do. But we've got to understand that at very least, no matter what else happens, if you had to stay at home with your kid and that was your whole job, and I mean, you're a fantastic mother. I've met Kaneho and he's turned out to be this incredible human being. So you know what you're doing. For now. No, but I mean, he is, right? And nothing's 100%. Like parenting is not there's no manual that tells you every step of the way. But here's the thing, is that you have thousands, if not millions of years of biological, genetic, and experiential stuff to draw on. If you're a woman who stays at home and looks after the kids, that is the way that it's been for millions of years. So you probably by default would be quite good at it, and men would be good at going out to hunt the meat by default. But most men don't want to go out and hunt their own food, and most women don't want to stay at home and look after the kids only. And that's okay. And thank God we live in a time where you could choose. But there are still things that we can't ignore and we mustn't lie about. Don't lie about biology. Don't lie about evolutionary history. And let's not lie about gender roles. We know what they are. And the majority of South Africans, there's probably a guy in like rural Eastern Cape who's listening to us right now on his phone. And he's listening to this and going, I can't believe anyone wouldn't agree with what Gareth's saying.
Did you say rural Eastern Cape?
Yeah. Well, any of those places.
I think rural, they like being stay-at-home husbands. Because I'm actually thinking about that, and I'm thinking about how it's women who work the fields. You know?
Yes. Hunter-gatherer. Hunter is the man, gatherer is the woman.
Yeah, but these
planter, harvester.
these are also, that's why I'm thinking it's women who work the fields. But Eastern Cape, KZN, those were always people who herded cattle, who had cattle, and that's what they did, was planting. They weren't out hunting.
But they didn't send the girls out to look after the cattle.
They weren't hunting.
The girls weren't out there looking after the cattle, were they?
No, but my point is
gender roles. Telling you. Gender roles. Anyway, listen, we could beat this drum and we can continue to, and I think it's got everybody in the comment section very, very excited. So we may come back to this at some point. But we've got to get ready for the burning platform.
I am glad you shared that with me. I will be looking out for stay-at-home dads, and I will be looking out for all the things that you spoke about.
If you can find
I'll be
one,
psychoanalyzing them. I'll be like, are you really happy?
If you can find one, and I will be as nice as I possibly can to this person when they come in. But I'd love to speak to a stay-at-home dad. Let's see what they can.
I'd love that.
And by the way, I don't mean one of those stay-at-home dads who's running your business from home.
No, proper producer Ryan.
Yeah.
It's a challenge.
All right, let's go. We got to get to the burning platform. That's coming up next. We've got Canthan, and we've got Joel Pollak all the way from Los Angeles. It's going to be a fun show. Stick around. Lots of things to get to. CliffCentral.com. It is Thursday morning.
South Africa. It's that time again.
Where we set our toes free and get ready to flip for a worthy cause this flip-flop day. We're taking over the nation soul by soul on Friday, the 17th of February.
But we can't do it without you.
Join me, Leanne Manners.
And Alexandro.
And me, Gabriella.
As we take a colourful stand in our flip-flops in support of the brave children and teens who have been diagnosed with childhood cancer and are receiving support from CHOC. Visit choc.org.za.
Together, we can make a difference.
Welcome to the Third Draft Podcast, the show where we interview. Wait, do I start with who we are?
Catch the show.
We chat all about
Content creation.
the
business of content.
business of content. Yeah, I
and
think
how
you can
much
take
money.
this one.
And how much? Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
and then I'll be like, how much money or something. You
yes,
know,
yes,
you have
yes,
to
go.
keep it a bit
yes,
spicy.
yes. I'm Cynthia,
And I'm Mash.
and we are the host of the Third Draft Podcast. So catch fresh episodes every Wednesday on cliffcentral.com
On YouTube.
and on podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. I like that. I like that. No, you need to do that. I like that. That's a good one. Love it.
Why only Pumi's on there. There we go. Everybody's on. It is a full house this morning, and the Burning Platform is where we get into all the current affairs stories of the moment, and there are enough of those to keep us busy for 8 hours. We've got our president delivering his tonight. We have Joel's president who delivered his last night. It was last night, right? It was, I think.
Last night, it was the day before because I watched it yesterday during
Guys,
the day.
what is this? Joel's as South African as any of us. Come
That's
on.
true. He can claim both, you see.
Yeah.
He's in the unique position where he can say he's American.
I
And
somehow
no one's
don't-
gonna-
I
Another
somehow don't think
African
he wants
American.
to claim Biden,
Uh,
but we'll get into that later.
that's you two. I want to give at least half an hour of this morning's discussion to Canton, who's been itching to speak about American politics, and it's something that Joel
Wait,
is well versed in.
Here. I'm gonna sit here and mediate.
Up my
Yeah.
air balloon.
You want to talk about spy balloons? All right. First things first, Joel wants to just weigh in on the conversation we were having before because he couldn't help himself. He came in here just like he says he's got something to say about this men provide gender role stuff that we were talking about before. So I'm going to open the floor. First of all, let me introduce him to you because you need to know who we're talking to here. He's a friend of the show. He's been on here before. Joel Pollak is a South African-born writer and attorney living in Los Angeles. He grew up in suburban Chicago and graduated from Harvard back in 1999. He returned to South Africa as a Rotary Scholar and stayed on to work here as a freelance journalist. He's worked in politics in South Africa. He also earned a master's degree in Jewish studies at the University of Cape Town and returned to the US, graduated from Harvard Law School 2009. Then he says he was a left-winger at that stage. You were
Earlier.
Yeah, you were a left-winger.
Mhm.
And then you decided you were not a left-winger, which we can get into, I suppose. I mean, you and I have spoken about this before. And you started working for Breitbart.
Yeah.
And you have been at Breitbart since 2011.
That's right.
And you are now the author of over a dozen print and online books, including How Trump Won and The Red November. Both interesting. I've read them both. He's married to labor economist Julia Pollak, who's the daughter of the late Rhoda Kadali. And that's actually why you're in South Africa at the moment. This is the book that Joel has written. It's about his mother-in-law, and we'll get into that too. So big agenda on the cards today. Canton Pele, well known to us on the show, and a regular co-host of the Burning Platform, and of course, Phumi Mashiko. So where do we begin, Phumi?
We're squeezing like really half a day
Shall we
into
let Joel-
an hour. Joel first. Joel walked in here
Yeah.
hot about.
Well, this is such a great program. This is one of the best podcasts anywhere in the world because the dynamic that goes on here between the host and
Great
the other
way
host.
to
And
start the
it's
show.
unbelievable. I mean, I came in here listening to it in the car and I really wanted to jump into this. And I'm not an expert on this at all, but I have to agree with Gareth that men provide and feel better when we provide. The one proviso I would add is if you're married or living with a woman, whatever, you don't have to necessarily earn more than she does in today's economy, in today's time and whatever. But a woman will actually put up with a lot of failure from a man as long as he's trying to provide.
There we go. Yeah, as long as he's
Right?
trying.
As long
Yeah.
as he's trying. He doesn't
Yeah.
have to earn more and he
Right.
doesn't have to succeed. But
But if he's sitting around,
yeah.
I mean, I think there is a special amount of scorn and hatred from women towards men who just sit around.
I want to tell you very briefly this story. There was a brief period I was unemployed. It was during the recession. I was between one thing and another. And I had a sort of an intervention from a concerned friend, a fellow ex-South African who actually came up to me and said, listen, I'm very happily married. I have a beautiful wife and all that. But I want to just tell you something. Love isn't enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
You
right.
Gotta, you got to go. And at the
Yes.
time I was interviewing for jobs. So it wasn't as if I was doing nothing, but I think a good male friend will take you aside and say, hey,
Mhm.
let me know how I can help, but you got to do it. You got to get your act together. That's-
Absolutely. Canthan, anything to add on that front?
No, I'm right there.
You're on the same page.
Although, I'm very happy to be a kept man. Just putting that out there.
yeah, exactly. No, it's good. You want to get to the point where she's earning
You
more.
see,
Yeah.
No, he's
wants
being
to be-
sarcastic, please.
No, I'm at the stage where I ask
Hey,
my
listen, my wife actually does earn more than
yeah. You ask your wife for
And
pocket
I'm-
money.
I'm
That's
chill
fine.
about that.
And you can make the lunches and take them to school, but
In leaps
you know.
and bounds. I mean, sometimes you've earned more than her, sometimes she's earned more than you.
Yeah, but between you, me, and SARS,
okay.
I didn't.
Well,
nobody saw me do it. You can't
I
prove
saved
it.
this. I saved this specially for you, Canthan, just to start your day off on the right foot. So here's SARS, of course, our revenue people here in South Africa, IRS of South Africa. Business Tech COZA reporting from Edward Kisvetter, the head of the Commission of SARS, says, think long and hard before joining a tax revolt in South Africa. He says, South Africans will do the right thing. And then Kali Creel, who's from AfriForum, says, quite rightly, when I pay tax, I am an accomplice to crime by providing loot for the others to steal. An accomplice associates himself wittingly with the commission of the crime by the perpetrator if he knowingly affords the perpetrator the opportunity to steal.
Yeah, I'm with Kali on this. Remember what I've said for years, guys? Tax evasion is a crime, but tax avoidance is a moral duty.
There we go. Thank you very much. All right, so lots to talk about. Let's start off. Well, we can begin in South Africa. I know Phumi's itching to talk about all the other states of the union and states of the nation. Apparently, John Steenhuisen did one. I didn't know about this, Phums.
He does
have
one
notes.
every year.
You-
Apparently they do one every year.
You have notes.
I have not seen one before now. It's called The True State of the Nation. And
Okay.
it was actually quite well attended. There was it looked quite well attended, and
Okay.
they did make mention of foreign dignitaries. It was in Cape Town.
Okay.
And of course, they were hit with load shedding. So there was no aircon. And you see a lot of people fanning themselves. I do think they should have maybe hired like battery operated fans, though, because
Yeah.
it does take away. I know that the point that they're trying to make with having the aircons out and the load shedding happen in the middle of their thing. But
I'm sorry, you said battery operated fans and had this picture of tunnies with vibrators. Sorry, guys. It's one of those days. Let's not go there.
But you know what I found quite fascinating about, and I've said this on the show before. Here, John Steenhuisen has set up an almost 52-minute conversation,
Mhm.
and he spent 26 of those minutes speaking about his opposition. That is just, as a marketer, as a communications person, that is a serious,
Yeah.
why give that much time? Why give that much airtime to your opposition? We all know the failures that they've got. This is your opportunity to
It's hard though.
very
It's hard.
emphatically-
It's hard if you're in a room and there's a stinking carcass and everybody's about to throw up.
It's
And
much
you don't
more
acknowledge the stinking carcass.
acknowledge and move on.
Okay.
It's much more
All right.
powerful to be selling us your solutions
Okay.
than it is to be beating the dead horse. Like we all agree, the guys have completely fucked up.
Mm.
They've had more than enough time
Yeah.
to prove what they can do. But for you to just keep beating that drum,
Yeah.
this is your opportunity to hard sell your solution to all the people that and he had quite a lot of people listening. It was all on it was Facebook Live, I think.
Okay.
It was on YouTube as well. And yet 26 of his 45 minutes
Right.
he spent on, and I counted the number of times he said ANC versus the number of times he said DA. Again, why give that much airtime to the opposition?
What do you think, Canthan?
Look, this is a particular drum that we've been beating on this show for quite a while. That what's going to get people to the polls in 24 is going to be people believing in something, not fighting against something. And that's if the DA would only speak to the kind of stuff that Chris Pappas does on a regular basis, that in itself would be enough to actually get people to say, hey, hang on a second. If they can pull off this stuff in Mgeni, then maybe they can do it in the rest of the country, and maybe I should give these guys a shot. And Phumi, yeah, I agree with you, and it frustrates me. I want to really.
You know, and I actually compared it to Herman Mashaba's address. So Herman Mashaba's address was called A New South African Dream, I think. And he trotted out all the tropes, right? So my fellow South Africans, South African dream we can all believe in. It was very much like the American addresses. But what Herman Mashaba did do was he did acknowledge the failures of the past, but he spent a big time speaking about what he believes in, what his party stands for, what his party believes in, and painting a picture of what they would create in South Africa if given the chance. And I think, and you know, there's a small difference. And I see somebody in the comments saying the DA has proven that they can do it in Cape Town. This is my point. If they spoke more about it, so that the sound bites we see of John Steenhuisen are sound bites that are reinforcing that message,
right?
You know, and Herman Mashaba, even though his delivery was dry and terrible, and you know his teleprompters were in the wrong place, so he never once looked straight into the camera and connected with people who are watching this online, right? But the things that he was saying, he was hitting all of the right notes when it comes to communicating.
And for you're not a huge Herman Mashaba fan, so for you to say that, you're giving credit.
Even some of the things that he was speaking about, unfortunately, Herman Mashaba's speech for me, who was 10 years old in 1994, does not resonate. You know, he spent a lot of time talking about 1994. He spent a lot of time talking about what those heady days were about. And I think for a lot of people today, that's such a long time ago, and I wasn't there. I wasn't part of that dream. The world that I see, the world that I've experienced here in South Africa right now, completely moved on. And if you're going to cast forward to something that can be done, don't look back. Just give me that. I think there's a lot of people, and we know this, the median age in South Africa is 27.
Yeah.
27. So they weren't even there when that 94 dream was had.
So Joel, what do you make of this? You pay enough attention to South African politics to know who all these characters are and to have some idea of what we're talking about, perhaps more informed than most South Africans, I hesitate to say. But with our State of the Nation on today, our poll, by the way, at this stage, people are saying that they could care less. They're not going to be watching. We got a poll going on YouTube. What do you have to say about this?
So this is really fascinating to me because I was in the DA. I was working for Tony Leon as a speechwriter. I used to go to the State of the Nation addresses, and we used to write Tony's response and that sort of thing. And at that time, the real challenge was to define a different vision from that of the ANC. Tony was very much about creating this choice and defining the DA as the other side of that choice. And I think that was successful to some extent. But I think the big question now, from the outside looking at South Africa, is can the opposition really present a reasonable alternative, not just in terms of policy, but when you look at what happened in Johannesburg with the mayor and things falling apart, can an opposition coalition actually exist that could govern South Africa in the future? And I think that's a case that the DA has to make to South African voters. In other words, if you trust us with your vote, can we keep things together in a stable way? And if you cannot do it in Johannesburg, the most important economic city in the country, can you do it in the country as a whole? Maybe you can do it in Cape Town and the Western Cape because of other reasons, but I think that's the case that the DA has to make. So as you point out, tell us your vision, but also tell us how you're going to build this alternative, and not just in terms of policy, but a lot of it is politics also, putting together the coalition of these other interests who may not want to join the DA and be led by John Steenhuisen, but who want to be part of this project. And if I can just start putting the plug in for the book, I promise you this isn't shameless promotion. It's actually a connection. So the book, Rhoda, Comrade Kadali, You're Out of Order, is about Rhoda's transition politically. But also what I think people will find interesting about this book is it goes back before 1994. For Rhoda, the high point of the anti-apartheid struggle wasn't necessarily 94 when the transition happened, but it was the late 1980s when, as bad as things were, there was this coalition that built to push apartheid out. And so there was a kind of pluralism and tolerance and diversity within that coalition. And it was fun, and it was multifaceted, and it was cultural, and that's what she wanted to see in the new South Africa. And instead there was this conformity, there was the ANC, there was Black economic empowerment, which became much more than a policy, but became kind of a culture, and it stifled dissent and became very politically correct. And now I think there's actually a flourishing. I mean, Gareth's podcast and even just ordinary radio, just driving around, I hear so many more voices being willing to criticize. Rhoda was among the first, but now it seems that people are becoming a lot more bold in what they're willing to say. And that moment that Rhoda used to think about, when there was this kind of unity in diversity, if you can find a way to bring that back into the new South Africa and show people you can rebuild that, then I think people will want to follow along. And it's very difficult to do. It's very difficult to know how to do. And yet I think that's the only way to move forward. We had the State of the Union, I think it was yesterday morning, South Africa time. I got up early to watch it, and it was Tuesday night in the States. What was interesting, I mean, it was actually quite a good speech, and I'm no fan of Joe Biden, but it was one of his better speeches because it was optimistic. He focused on the things that are going well. We have a lot of big problems. We have inflation. We have Chinese spy balloons. You know, we have a border that doesn't exist. But unemployment is the lowest it's been since 1969. And I don't think he deserves credit for it. The recovery began under Trump. But whoever you want to give credit to, you point to the optimism. You point to moving forward. I really like that. Something new that we saw that I liked but may have a few difficult implications in the future was we saw heckling for the first time. We've never actually seen heckling in the State of the Union address. Most people are very polite and they sit on their hands, and if they don't like something, they just don't applaud, but they don't say anything.
Listen, that speaker tried to shush them.
They rip up the copy.
Oh, they rip up. So you're right. That it started with Pelosi ripping up the speech. But now the Republicans were just openly heckling him when he said things that they felt weren't true. People shouting liar and things like that.
That's inappropriate behavior.
Well, I mean, do we really think that parliaments and congresses are places of great dignity and respect? I mean, it was the Japanese parliament that started with open fist fights. Do you remember? And here in South Africa, we've mostly had a dignified parliament, except when comrades are escorted out in the EFF.
Politics and
agents.
sausage making. Politics and sausage making better left out of sight.
Don't you miss the days, though, when there were actual assassinations on the parliamentary
I know, it was,
floor?
what, 1952, right? Somewhere around there.
Zafendus and Verwoed.
Yeah, guys. I mean, you know, those were the days.
Those like days of activity and excitement.
Yeah. You know, speaking of which...
just be careful. Just to be clear, Kanthan is not being treasonous or seditious or suggesting that we need assassinations now. He just said he misses the ones of old.
Well, we do have those. We do have quite a lot. The number of political
assassinations.
Assassinations has been climbing.
No, but guys, just to touch on what Joel was saying just now, and you've probably seen this whole thing about Jonathan Jansen saying, you know, were you better off under apartheid?
Mm.
Hey.
And you know what fundamentally pisses me off about this is the comparison that we have to make is not whether we were better off under apartheid. The question is whether when we were better off at the point at which corruption was actually in check. And if you go back to 2008, when our economy was flying, we had paid off our entire national debt. Load shedding was non-existent.
We had a surplus, for heaven's sake.
We had
a surplus.
That's what.
We got an American here. You guys wouldn't know
bequeathed.
about a surplus since what?
No, Joe Biden has printed more money than
print more
Americans
money.
have ever printed in history.
They just print more money.
Double the federal deficit.
So you're saying that it's fallacious to then say, did you have it better under apartheid?
Yeah, the apartheid era comparison is fundamentally flawed. In fact, we had it terribly under
the halcyon days are not prior to 94.
No, it's actually...
They're just prior to 2008 and post-94.
Exactly. Yeah. And, you know, if we use that kind of as a yardstick where, you know, the first thing that Mbeki did was to actually pay off the national debt, then take the money that used to be going to pay interest to the national debt and put that into social grants, which then was the single biggest transfer of wealth into the hands of the impoverished in this country. But which is absolutely fine. You can actually have things like a basic income grant or a social grant if you are not financing it with debt. You know, as the Norwegians have shown consistently, you have a sovereign wealth fund, you can get away with doing that type of stuff. But nobody talks about those types of solutions right now.
No.
And that's, so the frustration that we have right now, Joel, is not whether we can actually rally people around. The problem that we've got is that there were 11 million people who did not vote in the 2019 elections. So that is the actual issue. If we can mobilize a fraction of those 11 million people to get to the polls, then we can actually conclusively vote the ANC out of power. And this whole question of ragtag coalitions like we have.
And it's all
Sorry,
they
Phumi.
got.
Yeah, 11 million is all they got.
So the interesting thing about Rhoda's book, to come back to that, is that she was writing her columns at the very height of her public profile in South Africa during that time when economically things looked like they were going all right. But she was pointing to some of the things Mbeki was doing politically, the empowerment deals, the SABC and how it was becoming a tool of the ruling party, all of these things that were stifling dissent. And she said, this is the root of failure in the future. If you don't fix this now, then you'll have problems later. And that's the brilliance of her writing, is that she anticipated almost everything that's happening now because she was pointing at the roots of the system then. And Tony Leon actually used to have this great phrase. He quoted from Chekhov, the Russian playwright, basically saying that the leaves of a tree often delight us, but you have to look at the roots. And so at that time, the leaves were quite nice. The economy was doing better and so forth. There was still a lot of many problems with unemployment and crime and so forth. But what Mbeki did through kind of centralization of power within the ANC and drowning out dissenting voices. There was not one ANC member of parliament who stood up against his policy on HIV/AIDS, for example, or in Zimbabwe.
I remember
there's
that.
Absolutely
Or Zimbabwe.
no dissent whatsoever. And Rhoda looked at that and said, that's the problem. If nobody is speaking out against this obvious failure, moral failure, economic failure, health failure, then we're in big trouble in the future.
fact, the immediate compensation effect of that was Jacob Zuma. It was a coalition of the wounded, the people who felt they'd been sidelined and stifled by Mbeki, who eventually elected him. And we know what that led to, right? It was the beginning of a huge amount of pain. Pumi's also got some profitability, and I don't mean profitability. I mean the ability of a prophet, which Rhoda clearly had, in that she predicted that we would see the end of Didi Mabuza. We don't need to spend a lot of time talking about him because I don't think a lot of people have anything to say about him. I don't even think he has a lot to say about himself. But he's gone now. Pumi, you predicted this. You said that it won't be long before Paul Mashatile is parachuted into the job. What does a deputy president do?
He's the leader of government business.
I know you said that, but what does that mean? What does it mean?
Who knows?
Because he gets paid quite a lot of money, gets a good office there at the union buildings, blue light brigades.
Let's remember how Didi Mabuza ended up in that position.
Yes.
Because essentially there was a mighty tussle between Ramaphosa at Nasrec. And because of the fact that everyone was busy paying off votes for the position of president, they forgot to pay off votes for the position of deputy president. And that's how Didi Mabuza ended up being deputy president of the African National Congress. And therefore, he became deputy president of the country as a result. But, I think it's also been a pattern that if you're deputy president in the first term, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be there in the second term.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so we remember who was Jacob Zuma's first deputy president, don't we?
Was not Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka? No, that was under Thabo Mbeki. Who was the first deputy president?
See, this is astonishing.
It was a great game.
Yeah, we've completely forgotten already.
Who?
Damned if I can remember now. That's my point.
Oh, so you didn't ask in order to trick us into not being able to
I'm just pointing. Okay. No. It'll come to me suddenly. But the point is, it becomes
Look it up.
so nonsensical. It might have been Kgalema for. No, actually, it was Kgalema. It actually was Kgalema, and I'll tell you why it was Kgalema. Because remember that Kgalema replaced Mbeki as president.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Kgalema became deputy president under Zuma. And Kgalema did a very noble thing because he was technically entitled at that stage to get 2 salaries. And he turned down the 1 salary.
You are wrong because Baleka Mbete was there for a little while.
Yes.
That was while Kgalema was president.
Yes.
Then he became president. She continued to serve as deputy for a little bit.
Yes.
And then Cyril came in. And then Didi Mabuza.
No, Cyril came in only.
Cyril came in. He was deputy president from the 26th of May 2014.
Yes, I'm talking about the 2009.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that would have been Kgalema.
Kgalema was deputy president for 2009 through to 2014.
Okay.
Yeah, but my point being that the ANC has established a pattern.
He's probably the only guy who's ever gone from being president to being deputy president again.
No, actually, F.W. de Klerk had that honor.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that would be correct after 94. Yeah.
But, going back to this elephant in the room.
Is it an honor? Emotion.
Well, but going back to the elephant in the room, guys, is Steenhuisen right now likely to motivate 11 million people to actually get out of bed and go and vote on election day for him?
But, judging from what he was saying in his speech, that's not even, and I was disappointed in this because he spoke quite at length at the trajectory the DA was on to getting a 30%. And I was, there was on Sunday, I think one of the polls that was released by City Press was about how there is now just a 10% difference just in polling in terms of where the ANC stands and where the DA stands. That for me was quite sad because I thought to myself, why is that where you are aiming? Why are you not aiming at 50 or 55 or 60? Why is that? Because when you aim as low as 30, that's still not enough. You're going to be left with the shambles of having to cobble together some kind of coalition, even just to paint a big, bold picture. I was a little bit disappointed.
What I liked about what Joel said now about an optimistic State of the Nation address can do a lot it's your only opportunity really as president to lay out the agenda and to make people feel like something good could happen, right? And that's one of the biggest things a leader can do is give you some hope for the future, give you some big vision you can join in on, which is why we still remember Cyril's lie about building a tech city. Remember? And Tumamina. We bought into it because we were so desperate for hope. And remember when there's a market for hope and people are desperate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Look, if there's any bright side to what you say about Steenhuisen's address, and I haven't seen it, it's that we are talking about it at all. In the United States, the worst job in politics is to respond to the president's State of the Union address. When the opposition, in this case the Republicans, pick someone to respond to the president, even if it's Joe Biden, who's not generally a great speaker, if you're picking someone to respond to the president, it's the worst job in politics. You're always upstaged by the president. You can never compete with the pomp and ceremony of Congress.
Sure.
And usually it only has minefields for the politician who's doing it. Often ends up hurting their careers rather than helping them because they look so small. Bobby Jindal was a governor of Louisiana. He came on TV for the response and he had this tie that was too big, like looking like a schoolboy. You'd never put a tie on before, and that's all anyone could remember. Or Marco Rubio, who's still active in politics, and he kept drinking water. He just kept every few minutes, and that's all people remembered. It's a complete nightmare. So this year it was Sarah Huckabee Sanders who gave the response, and she used to be Trump's spokesperson. Now she is the governor of Arkansas because her father was the governor, Mike Huckabee, and she gave a speech that was remembered basically for one line. And essentially she said, the choice for American voters is between normal and crazy. And that's actually a pretty good line. So she laid it out and said, look, what's happening in the country is crazy. We've got transgenderism in the schools, and we've got oil companies being put out of business, and a border that doesn't exist, and crime's out of control in many cities. That's the crazy. We offer the normal. We offer policing and low taxes and all that stuff. So that was the sort of choice. So with Steenhuisen, I know that having been there behind the scenes, the DA is always very concerned about creating a contrast. And this 30% number, I mean, they want to give a number that's credible so that people won't think they're promising pie in the sky, but they also want to motivate people to think that by voting for the DA, you can win. But then there's the challenge. An ordinary person coming to politics understands that you don't win with 30%. Yeah. So how do you reach that? I mean, that's been the problem the DA has been trying to solve for 20 years.
Well, can I just touch on the optimistic side of Joe Biden's speech? And I've got a screen grab that I saved from the New York Times, who fact-checked Joe Biden's speech. Fact-checking Biden's State of the Union address. The president's speech contained no outright falsehoods, but at times omitted crucial context or exaggerated the facts. And it's absolutely spot on in terms of Biden's address. So one of the things that I want to point out, for example, Joel, that you highlighted, that unemployment is in fact at the lowest levels ever. there was crucial context that was actually provided by people who drilled down into those figures last week and said the reason why unemployment is at these low levels is that a massive number of Americans have needed to take second and third jobs on just to be able to keep up with the cost of inflation.
There's that, and there's also a problem, a demographic problem. And this goes back to the topic of discussion earlier in the show about men not working. There are many working age men who've dropped out of the labor force. They don't count in the official unemployment figure because you only count if you've been looking for work.
People still looking for work, so
Right.
not discouraged work seekers.
So what's happening with men who are not providing, who are not working? And we have a massive problem with drugs in the United States right now, fentanyl and
He spoke
drug
a little
addiction.
bit about that.
That's one of his big failures. And the Republicans heckled him about that because he hasn't even really, never mind the border policy. There's a difference between the parties about how to enforce the border, where the drugs are coming across. He hasn't even really done a big sort of moral show of, let's talk about addiction. Let's talk about changing our behaviors or supporting those who are struggling. He hasn't even really done that.
But then they'll heckle him about his son, surely.
Maybe that's why he doesn't do it. No, it's that. I mean,
Yeah.
that could be the explanation.
Yeah.
But he certainly hasn't used his son as
Well,
an example.
I
Anyway,
mean, the last she wasn't even a politician, but we brought up her name earlier when Phumi was comparing
Nancy's war on drugs.
Nancy Reagan was the last person in kind of society to actually say your drugs are bad. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, ever since then, it's been just this kind of, well, yeah, they're not so bad. Then they're acceptable. Then we should be allowed to have them all the time, and then actively encourage it. Seems like that.
And people made fun of her.
Slippery slope argument.
Well, people made fun of her. Her slogan was "Just say no." But I was a
Right.
kid growing up in the '80s, and that had an impact on me. And having someone say that made it easier to make that decision. But there are other reasons as well. There's also this issue of housing being very expensive in big cities. So a lot of young men are saying, "Well, I'll just live at home. I'll live with my parents and figure that out."
They never really grow up.
And what's happening is marriages are being delayed. The birth rate is plummeting. Women do not want to marry someone who's living at home with mom and dad, understandably
Also,
so.
when you can have sex if you're living in your parents'
Right.
house.
And that's statistically, Americans are having less sex than before.
Yeah.
So there's an effect
That
on
Trump
society.
is saying,
Knock on.
hold my beer.
But yeah, so we have a low unemployment rate, but there is this big problem. And some of it could be the long COVID phenomenon, which people are still debating. But my wife would tell you, as a labor economist, that an increasing number of Americans are reporting that they have trouble seeing, they have trouble focusing mentally. And many people think this could be an effect of COVID over the long run. So people are reporting disabilities that are associated with the long COVID. Again, I don't know whether it's a real thing or not, but
people also have very little self-discipline, and after COVID probably have a whole lot less self-discipline, and it has nothing to do with COVID.
it could be. But that's,
I mean, look at how everybody's distracted by their phones every 5 seconds, right? This is part of the problem. It's like you can't expect someone to actually be paying attention for more than a couple of seconds before they reach for the device.
sorry, what was that?
Exactly. So, for those people in Congress, and I mean, some of them.
Well, that's why they didn't notice that there were 5 Chinese balloons over the past several years, because they're too busy looking down at their devices.
Isn't
Like,
that interesting?
up there?
So what they said, and I'd love to hear your comments, all three of you, on this one. They
That is
said,
amazing. The Pentagon concealed data from the sitting president of the United States.
Apparently,
Wow.
so when
Wow.
Biden didn't do anything and sat on his hands for a week while the Chinese spy balloon was flying over every sensitive U.S. military installation, and then when he did say, "I told them to shoot it down," and they didn't listen to me, or whatever, and then they did shoot it down, then the Pentagon admits that there were a couple of others of these during the Trump administration that they just dealt with without even bothering to inform the president.
Yeah, there was a huge effort by the CIA, the FBI, the Pentagon to conceal information from Trump. There was an internal rebellion against Trump. They just felt this guy's not fit to serve. We're not going to.
If that isn't a
support him.
reason to clean out the FBI,
Absolutely.
CIA, and Pentagon, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
If you're
So the
not
swamp
telling
is
the
real.
president,
The swamp is real. It's absolutely
wow,
real.
you're not telling the president that stuff, you are in direct dereliction of duty. You are not an elected official in one of these bureaucracies. You are put there often because of merit, hopefully, and otherwise because you've worked really hard to get to the job that you're in, and you are still responsible to the political officials who are elected to
Right.
look after you, to make sure that you're doing your job. They didn't do that. They must be fired.
And that's one of the reasons Biden's approval ratings are still so low, even though he's got a successful economy and low unemployment and so forth. People just don't believe that he makes decisions and he's in charge. You know, I tweeted when this balloon was flying around, Trump may be a prick, but that's how you pop a balloon. You know, just a sense that Trump did things. And that's why the deep state sort of mobilized, because they didn't want him to do things. Some things he managed to do, but they were very concerned. They hated his adventures with Kim Jong-un in North Korea. They were convinced that this was terrible. It ended up not being terrible. It avoided a nuclear war.
Right.
They were convinced the embassy in Jerusalem in Israel would have been a disaster, causing terrorist attacks. That didn't happen. So Trump was willing to try all these things that were out of the box and that worked most of the time. But the institutions of state that are permanent, that have these employees that have been there for decades, that control the contracts and the policies, they were trying to resist Trump at every opportunity. And people on the left started seeing it more than people sort of in the center left. That's why you have journalists like Glenn Greenwald and Matt Taibbi. These are left-wing journalists who have now documented all the abuses of power by Twitter, by the deep state and so forth. And they've said, look, we didn't vote for Trump, but this should not happen to any government. Look at how these guys treated the democratically elected president. If they can do this to Trump, they can do this to anybody.
And you could see it, you know, they were present. A lot of the generals were present at the SONA. You could see it in their body language, you know, that there's a level of antagonism that even Joe Biden even said to them, you can smile, you know, when he started out, because they were stonewalling. They were sitting out there in the front, very sully, very kind of and body language, you know, just in terms of, and unfortunately today we're speaking a lot about communication. Body language also goes a long way to telling you the state of mind that a person is in. And just seeing those generals as a wall, I think there were 3 rows of them, just staring him down.
And I also noticed that it was and I didn't watch the whole State of the Union, but I did notice that the same thing Phumi did. And then I saw the Supreme Court justices who also sit right in front of him. So immediately, and I know this when you're making a speech, you guys all know this as well. The people that you see the most, the people closest to the front, right? And he's got the the generals and he's got the Supreme Court justices. And they are the only 2 groups of people who do not stand and applaud. Regardless. It's almost like there's they understand their job is to be there. They've got to witness this, but they do not have to express a single scintilla of emotion.
So some of the justices don't go. They're not allowed to express anything, but it's optional for the justices. They go as a courtesy to the president, but not all 9 of them go.
So who did Clarence Thomas?
He doesn't go. He's never gone. He's never gone. Clarence Thomas doesn't go.
Love him.
And Samuel Alito, one of the other conservative justices, he used to go until Obama criticized the Supreme Court in their presence at the State of the Union, and they're not allowed to respond. And Alito shook his head and he mouthed the word no. And that was a scandal in the newspapers for the week that followed. So he just decided, stuff this, I'm never coming back. So he just doesn't come back at all. And they feel as if they are trapped. If the president decides to comment on some Supreme Court case, there's nothing they can do. So the conservative ones tend to stay away. The liberal ones, the left-wing ones, they tend to go. But I wouldn't go. I mean, if you're stuck there and you can't respond, you know.
Also, can I ask all of you, because we've got these State of the Nation, State of the Union things going on, isn't this a whole lot of outdated pageantry from monarchical Europe? I mean, it's just such a joke, because I know a lot of people were already going after our politicians in this country for the stupid dress up that they do for the State of the Nation, which is just the most outrageous. First of all, it's in bad taste.
I think that the media should just not cover it.
The media should pay.
We don't need a red carpet anything.
But is there not because people like this stuff. We know that people have this inbuilt, they tend to like a little bit of pomp and pageantry. I mean, I saw our military, whatever you can call them, a military, pretending to know what they were doing, marching through Cape Town, rehearsing for yesterday. There's some videos there. Ironically, the video I saw was from Instagram account for Mavericks, the strip club that I follow on Instagram. They were filming the soldiers marching down the street there, getting ready for the State of the Nation. And you see, everybody stands up and play the, Hail to the Chief as the president walks in America. And I just think a lot of this it's inappropriate in a democracy. It's fine in a monarchy.
No, let me offer a different take
No,
on
I
it.
think it
Okay,
is-
I mean, effectively, what we have is the State of the Nation address, or State of the Union in the case of the US. Effectively, you treat your country as a corporation, and this is your annual general meeting, where you have the chief executive who's basically rolling out what has been the case up until now and what the strategy is going to be in the year going forward. And essentially, that's what it needs to be. And then it's generally followed by the budget speech about a week later, which then maps out exactly how the spending priorities are going to go. So I think that all of the other stuff that you're talking about, Gareth, absolutely is spot on. The idea of dressing up for it, and frankly, so many of those things that people wear are just such friggin' embarrassments.
The history of this speech in the States is interesting. Under the US Constitution, the president is required to provide a report to Congress, but there's nothing about a speech. So Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter. That was here's my report. There you go. Read it. Goodbye. No ceremony. He just sent it in, And then for a long time into the 20th century, they used to do it at the end of the year. So it was sort of a year-end summary rather than what it is now at the beginning, as you said, of sort of setting the agenda and moving forward. But the State of the Union in the United States is a way for the president to try to set his policy priorities for the year. And,
That's it.
It sometimes is a double-edged sword. Trump talked about immigration reform in his State of the Union in, I think it was 2019 or 2018. And people watched this overseas. And so that summer, we had a surge of migrants to the border because they had watched Trump's speech saying, we're going to change the immigration laws and fix this problem finally. So then you had the border overrun by people. And that ended the effort to fix the immigration laws. It was self-defeating to sort of announce we were going to do this. So,
well, one of the things, when I paid more attention to this last State of the Union than I've done ever before, simply because I was looking to compare what Biden is doing to what our guys are doing. I've watched lots of all the past, I've watched Reagan's speeches, but when I was watching yesterday, one of the things that stood out for me is so much of what Biden was reporting was also, his theme was very much a let's get the job done. Let's finish the job is what he kept repeating. Let's finish the job. Because he also spoke a lot about legislation. He spoke a lot about the policies he's trying to push through. He spoke a lot about what was signed off. He spoke a lot about where they want to go. And that for me is actually a very useful tool for business, for people in civic society, because it gives you an insight into where the priorities are. Similarly, I used to, with Thabo Mbeki, I used to listen to his State of the Nation. I'd get the speech, I'd highlight all of those areas. Yeah, because it gives.
By the way, Joel, Phumi's
insight.
the only person who read the entire reports as they came in from the Zondo Commission. Every single day, she had a summary. She had something to say about it. She's a good citizen through and through.
But it's very self-serving, right? Because it is also about knowing where the spaces are to operate. When you work in civic society, when you work in the NGO, NPO space, when you work in communications, all of those things are important because it tells you where they're going. It also tells you where they're sending the budgets.
It's also interesting what they leave out.
Yeah.
So Biden said almost nothing about climate change. And when he came into office, it was all about climate change. They canceled this pipeline.
One thing.
Yeah, one thing.
Right.
But now energy prices are through the roof. Nobody wants to hear about climate change. In California, my bill for gas in the what we use for the stove and for heating and whatever, it's normally about $50 a month. Last month it was $250. We haven't changed how much we use. It's just that the price has gone up so much. And so people don't want to hear about climate change. They're fed up with it. They're paying too much for fuel. They're paying too much for their homes to be heated, too much for electricity. And so he leaves that out. He also left out crime, basically. He talked about police and law enforcement, but that's in the context of this debate about race. Many American cities are struggling with crime. And so it's definitely a way for the president to highlight the things he thinks are going well for him. He doesn't want you to,
Oh, absolutely.
But, one of the things that Rhoda found fascinating about American politics was that there's this focus on policy and this focus on current events and so forth, but a complete almost reluctance to talk about the broader constitutional issues. People didn't really have a sense of the bigger picture. And American politics does tend to get bogged down in the details. And for all of its flaws, South African politics, maybe because it's fairly recently coming out of a democratic transition, South African politics was more conscious of some of the deep constitutional issues that were happening. And ordinary South Africans were more aware, not just politicians and pundits on the news. People understood what the Zondo Commission was about, why this was a threat to South African democracy and so forth. And there was more of a consciousness. In the 2020 election, which she observed with great dismay, having become a supporter of Donald Trump, she could not understand why Americans could not count votes. And she came to me one day. We used to trade ideas all the time because she was writing her columns for the South African press and I was working on my stuff for Breitbart. And she would say, wait a minute, you don't have an independent electoral commission? You don't have any kind of anything that, I said, no, well, the states handle it. And she just was beside herself that the world's leading democracy had no way to count votes and it had to be fought out in the courts and it had to be done in a certain period of time. And it was just chaos.
I suspect that, 1.6 billion Indians would disagree with that statement about the world's leading democracy.
Right. Rightly so, maybe. I mean, yeah, but that Rhoda was struck by some of these differences and she would reflect on them. And she felt Americans didn't understand some of the dangerous territory that some of this was getting into. And that she was more conscious of.
I think they understand it full well.
Say some more about that.
The Democrats. Yeah, look, I mean, essentially the reason why they will insist that you need ID in order to buy a gun, they will insist that you need an ID to drive a car. But in order to vote, no, you don't need an ID.
Right.
Yeah, because you're actually trucking these people across the border and you know that they're going to end up voting Democrat because, hey, the reason why they're there in the first place is because the Democrats are actually going to roll out the red carpet for them.
Yeah, your faith in the system is shaken when you have this vote by mail, which we introduced. It's now almost universal. The day you get a second ballot in the mail that's not yours, that's the day you don't believe in the system anymore.
And that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see this, but okay, so there's a whole lot of stuff going on in American politics that I know Canton is really desperate to talk about
Let's
this
do it.
morning.
No,
because-
actually, we''ve got about 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
So I actually want to touch on Cyril tonight.
Okay,
I think there's a lot of stuff that people have been talking about
go on.
with regard to Cyril. So the first thing is that people for the longest time have been saying, when is Cyril going to reshuffle his cabinet? Now, you might remember that we had a discussion on this show where at the beginning of the year, where I said that Cyril is the first president that we've had of the African National Congress who is not accountable to the African National Congress because of the fact that he is there based on the fact that he had the money to buy the votes to be there, but he's not reliant upon a support base within the African National Congress. And the corollary to that is that when people say, when is Cyril going to reshuffle his cabinet? The only reason he would want to reshuffle his cabinet is to surround himself with people who are loyal to him and who are going to carry out his agenda. But he doesn't have people who are loyal to him, and he doesn't have an agenda.
So this is all pointless.
It is all pointless. So at the point at which Didi Mabuza says that he's stepping down as deputy president of the country, and Cyril says, no, hang on a second, this is premature, and so everyone is now expecting that there'll be a great reshuffle that's going to happen this evening. I don't believe that there's going to be a great reshuffle. I know there's a lot of expectations.
He wouldn't use the SONA for that anyway, would he?
Well, what does he in fact use the SONA for, apart from being shocked about stuff in general?
Losing his iPad every now and then.
Yeah. But again, going back to
What
tonight.
what a bumbling fool this guy's turning out to be. I mean, we had every reason. For me, you never
I found the
believed it.
scorecard.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but he's a bumbling fool that's not accountable. So, people who are saying, for example, that Paul Mashatile is now going to become the deputy president of the country, I don't think that's necessarily a given. Okay, because it doesn't necessarily mean that because Paul is deputy president of the African National Congress, that he now needs to be deputy president of the country. So I think it's very likely that you're going to have someone who's, shall we say, not as potentially divisive, because Paul has a power base, which Cyril doesn't. So I think you're far more likely to see someone like an Enoch Godongwana or a Ronald Namola now being pushed into the position of deputy president rather than Paul Mashatile. I can see Paul Mashatile getting a cabinet position, but I don't expect that there is going to be a reshuffle of significance.
How frightening that he doesn't have a support base and he doesn't have an agenda. I'm still, those words that you said are echoing in my head. Now, Pums, with your permission, I'm going to let Joel just give us a little preview of the book, because I did invite you here to be a part of the Burning Platform, but I want to talk about this book because we're doing the launch tonight. And I mean, it's really comprehensive. First of all, congratulations on writing it. You've done an excellent job of even putting, I saw just breezing through it earlier, footnotes on every page. When last did you see someone write a biography to that degree of specificity and to leave, all these articles, all of these different reference materials? How long did it take you to write?
Well, Rhoda had talked about wanting to write an autobiography for quite some time. So she actually chose the title, Comrade Kadali, You Are Out of Order, because that was her persona within the ANC. And then she was diagnosed with cancer in September 2021. And so we sat down and said, we have to do this right away. And I sat with her for every afternoon, and she would talk to me and I'd take notes. She gave me all her files, letters that she had written with friends and family, all of the speeches she had given, all of the files on her organization in Pumalelo, everything she possibly had on the Human Rights Commission. And I produced a draft. I gave it to her. I printed it out. And in between, I left blank pages so she could write things that I'd forgotten and she could make corrections. So she actually went through the entire first draft before she passed away. And it is a story not just about Rhoda, and of course she was my mother-in-law, so it was a labor of love in that sense, but it was also a story about South Africa and about the movement of this one highly, highly principled person who was part of the struggle for freedom, but became one of the main critics of the new government, about how South Africa has moved and changed and what South Africa's future prospects are, and what Rhoda believed. If I had to summarize Rhoda's philosophy, it would be a kind of democratic pluralism. She didn't speak in abstract terms about the individual and the state and liberalism versus socialism. What she said was the voter has to have a choice. I want to be able to choose between socialists on the left and nationalists on the right, because having a choice is the only thing that allows me to hold the politicians accountable, no matter how much I agree with them. And she was a member of the ANC, but she supported the DA in several local elections and national elections, but she would also be very critical of the DA and say...
She sounds like a typical South African, just by the way, because we all like to do all of those things you just said. We'll vote this way in that election, but that way in another. And many people who would have been... Yeah, of course. And that's a good thing, right? Yeah. It's a part of our burgeoning and slowly maturing democracy. But I like the fact that she is also representative of that echelon of people who were, they call them stalwarts in South Africa, that's what we say. And I have no doubt that all of her friends were of the same mind, that these were principled people who at some point decided that because of their principles, they weren't prepared to just go the way of their party. Even though the party was the thing that sustained so many of them during those very difficult years.
And it meant that she had intense debates with people and sometimes arguments with friends. Helen Zille at Rhoda's memorial service said Rhoda could have done anything except a diplomatic career. She was absolutely politically incorrect, and she was confrontational. And that's what people liked about her. People felt that even if they disagreed with her, the fact that somebody was out there creating this debate was good for the country.
I think it's really worth having a look at this book. And obviously we'll do the launch tonight, and it should be available in stores. And I would suggest that you could get it online as well.
And the launch, if you want to come along,
that's it, guys. What if people want to come to the launch?
At Exclusive Books Rosebank at 6:00 tonight. So you may miss the beginning of Cyril Ramaphosa's address. You have to watch that afterward. But you can choose between me and Cyril Ramaphosa, I think.
Well, don't worry, because
it's across the road from my office. I might come say hi.
Come and say hi, Pums. We would love to see you there. But here's the final poll update as of 7:52 this morning. So there may be a few more votes in here. But how many people are going to watch the president? Well, out of 300 and something votes, 18% said yes. Only 18% are going to watch. That's really bad. 52% were just no, straight up no, and 30% said I don't care enough.
Sure.
So between that 52 and that 30, giving it a nice 72% of people just couldn't care less.
So 72% of the people at the book launch this evening, John.
That's right. Yeah, that's good. That's good for the book
80,
launch.
Looks like 82.
82%.
82. Sorry.
Yeah.
Bad for the country. Right.
Well, come to the book launch. Exclusive Books Rosebank at 6:00. It'll be a lot of fun. And, the best part is the question and answer. So let's get a debate going.
That'll be fun. All right. Thank you all very much. Kanthan, Phumi.
Love the
Joel?
new studio, guys.
Yeah, we still got a little bit of work to do in here. Phumi and I arrived this morning, and we've had to find out where to switch on the power after it tripped, and we're putting in soundproofing still. And I only realized after switching that screen behind you off, you look much better now on camera without the glaring light
The
of the
blue
screen
light.
behind you.
You know, it's too late for me at this age.
No, we got to do some lighting. There's a lot to do in here. Trust me, we can make you look really great.
And
We
for
will.
all the people who were listening last week, the coffee has not even marginally improved.
I know. And Phumi and I spoke about it for like an hour, the first hour of the show. We'll sort that out too. All right, everybody, have a happy day. We will see you tomorrow at 6